Staying active is a good idea at any age, especially during retirement years. This is Dale Johnson. Let's talk about it today on The Aging Adventure, brought to you by Legacy Retirement Communities with John Kopetsky, Executive Director at Legacy Terrace, and Kathy Blythe. Kathy, good morning. John, good morning.
Good morning, Dale.
Jim Hegarty from the Better Business Bureau is going to join us a little bit later on the show. First, Understanding Dementia and Symptoms with Michele Carlson, Activities Director at Legacy Arbor.
Good morning, Michele. We're becoming more enlightened all the time about dementia and symptoms. And of course, it's easy if suddenly you start forgetting a few things, you worry that maybe something big is happening. What are some things that you recommend that we look for and be vigilant about in our loved ones too?
Well, good morning, Kathy. Thanks for having me. The most important thing we're talking about is that it's not normal aging, and clarifying too something that dementia is an umbrella term for diseases that affect your memory and other things that we do, talking, walking, and finding out which one you have is important, getting a diagnosis, because there's so many things that are affected with these diseases, and knowing how that disease may progress for you is important. Also ruling out other things. There can be other metabolic problems, med problems that can mimic symptoms of dementia. So getting to that doctor and getting that diagnosis of what's going on and ruling out what it isn't is really important.
And when you get the diagnosis, there are so many different options that are out there as far as medication that if people can get on that early enough, they could stay level longer, right?
Correct. Most of the meds that are available are to help that connection in the brain and work better in the earlier onset of the disease versus later. Usually later in the disease, the damage is already done, and so those meds become less effective. So getting anything that's available to you at that time, and also for your future planning, what am I going to need? What does my future look like? And what do I want to have happen? And helping your family also plan for what you may need. That's also an important part of the diagnosis is some of the different types of dementia. There's over 100. And so you might have one that can be very problematic. So finding that out and learning what you need to do to take care of that.
So how does one, is there one test that can be taken that will differentiate dementia? Is it a series of tests? Is it a doctor? What's that process like?
Well, remembering that dementia is the umbrella term, and all those types of dementia fall under that. So Alzheimer's is a type of a dementia. Just like if you had a cancer, you would have a type. So if you have Alzheimer's, your treatment may be one thing. If you have vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, alcohol-related dementia, the doctor performs all sorts of tests, starting with lab tests, family history, some of the MRIs, CAT scans. It's really a process of elimination. Diagnosis of an actual dementia happens only at death through brain autopsy. So really what they're looking at is what is it not, and then what do you have going on to indicate what it is. And remembering too that Alzheimer's is just not memory loss. That's not the main, it's part of it, but it's not the only component of it. So there's a lot of other things that go along with that.
You mentioned family history. That sounds like that's a risk factor. Are there other risk factors as well?
Smoking, high cholesterol can contribute to vascular dementia. So alcohol-related dementia, of course, alcohol abuse, diet. There's never been anything conclusive in the years I've been in this field. Because I've taken care of a lot of people that were very healthy and highly educated and still had dementia that still progressed the same way. So there is still so much to learn. So being involved in the Alzheimer's Association and the Walk to End Alzheimer's, those are the way they fundraise to help conduct these studies. And those are really important.
Before we go, Michele, can you give us some of the things to look for that might indicate a red flag?
You're really looking at changes in someone's behavior on a regular basis. So they're doing things that affect their daily life, things that they've normally done, the checkbook, the managing their phone, going to a job, directions. One of the earlier indicators of a dementia is loss of direction. There's also a lot of talk of loss of smell. But looking for changes in personality, oftentimes people that will develop a dementia will become very combative and agitated as a defense mechanism to keep people away. Communication can be very difficult. Spatial awareness, where am I at in connection to the room? Getting lost in a space that you're familiar with. Loss of recognition of a loved one's very common. So it's sometimes they can be very subtle, but most people will notice them repeatedly and ignore them. So the important thing is keep track of what's going on, write it down, contact your physician. That's really your best line of defense.
Great information as always, Michele. And I know Lincoln is blessed to have many resources available for families and persons who are dealing with dementia and memory loss. So thank you for sharing that. Some great tips for us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Michele. Coming up, scammers targeting seniors when the aging adventure continues. Welcome back. I'm Dale Johnson on the Aging Adventure with Kathy and John. No one knows more about scams than the Better Business Bureau, and no one knows more about the Better Business Bureau than Jim Hegarty, Bureau CEO.
Good morning to you, Jim. It's great to have you back on KFOR.
Hi, yeah, I feel like this is like a class reunion or something like that.
Something like that. Unfortunately, the scammers haven't gone away in the interim since we last talked to you. And lately, there's been a growth in the romance scams.
Yeah, and I think some of that certainly could be connected to the isolation that so many senior Americans experienced through COVID, that the folks that perpetrate these romance scams, and what I'm talking about with romance scams is dating sites or sites that are designed to connect people just to kind of combat some of that loneliness, people that are looking for companionship, fellowship. And so they've been encouraged, or maybe all on their own, just through marketing, they've created a profile and placed it on, one of the well-known dating sites. It could be Match.com, it could be Plenty of Fish, whatever it might be. So scammers create fake profiles and they load hundreds of these fake profiles onto these sites in hopes that, one of these individuals that posts their own profile might be attracted to the illusion that they've created. And in fact, we had a retired school teacher in Lincoln, Nebraska, who lost her husband very suddenly to an unexpected heart attack. And so for about 2 years, she had friends encouraging her to put a profile up on Match.com to see if maybe she could just find a companion to go to the movies with, or have dinner with, or have coffee with, that, she needed to combat this sort of the pull towards isolation that can happen with people. So she finally succumbed, and she put her profile on Match.com. Within an hour, she was winked at. That's what happens. You get a wink from somebody that's interested in your profile, and the individual that winked at her was a widower. He lost his wife suddenly, and then magically had children just about the same age as her, many similarities. And they communicated back and forth on the site. And after about a couple of weeks, he said, well, maybe we could FaceTime with each other. And that's the first tip off to the rip off. They try to pull you off of the site's traditional communication methods. So she began FaceTiming with this individual. He was down in Mississippi. He claimed to be from France. He was there managing a crew for ExxonMobil on an oil rig off the coast of Mississippi. Very charming, very handsome, good looking. He introduced her to his mother, to his daughter. And this went on for months. It was a very sophisticated courtship. He was socially engineering her. This individual was a scammer from Nigeria who managed all sorts of profiles like this. All of the people that he introduced her to were paid actors. He hired them to play these roles. Eventually, over the course of about 10 months, he won her confidence and had her believing that the money that was owed to him by ExxonMobil was being held in some kind of abatement because of trade issues going on between the US and France, and he wasn't going to be able to pay his employees their Christmas bonus, and she offered to help out. And began sending him money. He sent documentation that appeared to be very authentic from ExxonMobil. And to make a long story as short as possible, over the course of about a month and a half to 2 months, she wired over $400,000 to this individual before he vanished off the face of the earth. And she lost everything. When I spoke to her, she talked to me about how she had considered, just ending her life. It just was, she was so devastated. She was so embarrassed, didn't know how she would ever confide in her family that she had lost her life savings to this individual. And we learned that this individual had another woman, almost the same age, identical situation, on the hook up in the Northeast. I think it was in Massachusetts. And he had taken her for nearly $600,000. So 2 victims of just this one scammer that winked at an innocent person on Match.com who put her profile up there just because she was lonely and looking for companionship. Two women, he took them for over $1 million. So this is a remarkably lucrative crime that's being managed and in many cases delivered by very sophisticated crime gangs in Nigeria. And it's like organized crime. It's very, very lucrative, and it's all designed to take advantage of people who are vulnerable, lonely, and in some cases, maybe not on top of their game mentally, as has been discussed here today. Imagine somebody that's in maybe one of these early stages of vulnerability and nobody in the family knows. And they're being targeted not just by these romance scammers, but by every imaginable kind of tactic that you can imagine to steal their money. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're stealing their money.
We're talking some serious stuff here with Jim Hegarty of the Better Business Bureau on the Aging Adventure, and we'll have more to come in just a moment.
This is Dale Johnson with John and Kathy. On the Aging Adventure, we're focusing on senior scams with Jim Hegarty from the Better Business Bureau.
Jim, thanks for staying over and visiting with us here this morning. We had talked about the romance scams. I know that certainly isn't the only one that listeners need to be aware of. What are some of the other prevalent ones we're seeing today?
I was thinking a little bit about some of the free trial offers that we see so often, and so many of them appear to kind of target people that are experiencing issues with aging, whether it's memory loss. It could be, it could be anything related to just the sort of impact that your body experiences with aging. And many of these free trial offers are being delivered by, again, very sophisticated scammers and they're really designed to kind of lure people into these subscription traps. So, you think you're just going to get a free trial offer for some pills that are going to help you with cognitive issues. You have like 40 or 50 days to try the product. You don't get it for like 35 days. So you don't really have time to test the efficacy of it. And by the time you've decided that you want out, the free trial period is over and you're already involved in a monthly ding on your credit card for a subscription that you've signed up for without even knowing that you did so. So we just want people to be super cautious about that stuff and be sure to check the companies out that are offering them. Many times they have F ratings with the BBB because of this practice that they're engaged in of pulling people into these subscription services really without their knowledge. When you click on accept, what you really don't realize is that you've just agreed to a lot of fine print that you never took time to read. And it's hard to get them unwound and to get people out of those. So check the companies that are offering the products out before you make a decision to enter into a deal with them. Let the BBB help guide you through this process for sure.
Really, the fact that you are there doing what you do all the time, Jim, with letting us know about different businesses, it's such sense to always check with the Better Business Bureau before you're making any kind of a big purchase or having any work done on your home, anything like that. It's a wonderful resource for that. Now, as far as the scams go, again, as we continue talking about those, some of these have lived for a long time and get a new gasp of life, just like the IRS calls that people get threatening that they think are from the IRS, that threatening them, this and that, and also the calls from grandchildren that they think are their grandchildren.
Yeah, so the emergency calls, right? So you get a call and it's from a distressed grandchild. They'll say grandma, grandpa. Oftentimes they know the names of the person that they're calling's grandchildren. How they acquire that information. Your guess is as good as ours. They pay a lot of money for a lot of data that's been compromised in so many of these data breaches that have occurred. And again, they may be talking to somebody who's maybe not at the top of their game, and they will lead you to believe that they're one of your adult grandchildren, maybe in trouble on a spring break trip. You've been arrested. You're in a foreign country. If you don't get enough money to get you out, you could be held there in a foreign prison. I mean, they use every kind of scare tactic imaginable. And again, so let's say you get one of these calls, or let's say you get an email from a friend of yours that claims they're on a vacation in England and they've been in an accident and they lost their wallet and they need some money wired to them. Just take a breath and recognize that it's like 99% certain that none of this is real. So take a moment. Call your adult grandchildren, call your children to make sure they know where their kids are. Call your friends, and you're going to find that they're probably nowhere near a foreign country. They're not on spring break. They haven't been arrested. And we've seen this over and over again. I mean, a good friend of mine, we talked about this once, Kathy. He was a very dear friend of mine, a doctor here in Omaha, got one of these calls from his grandson, Seth, thought his grandson had been arrested up in Canada. They put the Canadian Royal Mounted Police on the phone, said they needed $4,000 or Seth was going to be held up there and it's going to just ruin his life. And my friend went off and wired the money. I couldn't believe that he did this, right? I mean, he knows me. He should have called me. And we were able to get that deal unwound for him. I drove to the bakers that he sent the money from, and we were able to stop the transaction before it had been picked up, and he got his money back. But he was within inches and seconds of losing that $4,000. And if he would have just called his daughter, he would have found out that Seth was right there with her the whole time. So folks just need to be careful. And many of these government calls, they're imposter calls. Just because it says it's Social Security or IRS, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is. So if you get a call from Medicare, Social Security, IRS, it's almost certain that those are scam calls, because that's not the way that they communicate with people. But just say, whatever it is that you are telling me I need to do, I'm going to hang up and I'm going to call the IRS. I'm going to call Medicare. I'm going to call whoever it is you say you are at a number I know belongs to you. And if there's a problem, then I'll address it.
Great information, Jim. Thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you for all the good work the BBB does, protecting not only seniors, but consumers of all ages.
We'll look forward to having you back again, Jim. Thanks so much.
Okay, take care, everybody.
John, to continue learning about the Legacy Retirement communities, where can listeners go?
Email questions at legacyretirement.com, by telephone at 402-436-3000, or our website is legacyretirement.com.
And Kathy, we'll catch up next week.
See you then.
Every Saturday morning, the emphasis is you and your retirement years on The Aging Adventure. I'm Dale Johnson.